I'm gonna start with hola. So just like this is my 4th time in Barcelona, so it's definitely my favorite city in the whole Europe. And the funny coincidence is that I'm here for the 3rd time, the 3rd consecutive year in October in Barcelona. So I thought that was interesting. And today we're going to talk about coding and deploying Angular to the cloud. Does anyone here put their code into the clouds? Maybe? What kind of tools are you guys using? Well, like what kind of clouds are you using? Are you using AWS, Heroku, Zeit? Is anyone using Azure? Oh, we have a few brave ones here. That's awesome. So my name is Simona Cotin, and I work as a developer advocate at Microsoft. And basically, my role is to make the JavaScript community happy on Azure. So if you have any kind of questions about Azure or about Angular, like I do love Angular as well, maybe even more. So if you have any questions about JavaScript, Angular, or Azure, do reach out on Twitter. I work with people like John Papa. Does anyone know John Papa? Yeah, he's my boss. But today, I'm going to try to kind of get the inner Sheldon from each of us and make him super productive, super fast. Do you like being fast? Super productive? Yeah, that's cool, right? Last week I was at Angular Mix, where I got to see for the first time most of the Angular team speaking. And this is one slide from Igor Minar's talk. I'm not sure, has anyone seen it already? He talks about, cool, so there's one guy there. He talks about software engineering as a discipline, and he talks about how we are actually building the invisible, which is kind of cool, right? This is what we're actually doing, even though we have user interfaces. It's really like you don't get to measure software engineering as you do I don't know, electrical or mechanical engineering. We're just building stuff that we're trying to measure, but we're not always succeeding. And so we have common problems like, it works on my machine, or we haven't changed anything, like it should work, and like this was working fine yesterday, but it doesn't anymore. So one common approach to fix some of these issues is using CICD. And some of you might be feeling like this is how I used to feel about CICD. And I was also like, isn't this a DevOps job? Isn't this what DevOps people should do? And aren't they like this, like super terminal users or something? Should I turn into that? Or maybe should I just try to use Jenkins and like this awesome UI, super complicated, where you have to configure lots of stuff? I'm going to debunk all that. Like today we're going to learn how Circle CI, or how you can make CI/CD easy. And like any one of us can actually start and automate our process or our development in a really easy way. And so I can show you that you're going to be a CI/CD master in a few minutes. So what does CI/CD stand for? Couldn't I care less? Does that sound right? Yeah? Well, it's actually continuous integration and continuous delivery. And more often, we're only referring to building a continuous delivery pipeline. And let's see what it takes to get there. Well, first step is automating as much as we can. And we're going to automate our build process. And because we have Angular CLI, that's going to be super easy. We're also going to automate our deployment process, and that should be easy as well. And finally, we need to automate our tests, because we want to make sure that we are writing code, we are pushing it to GitHub, right? Or to whatever source control, and then our build starts, and then our tests are being run against our code, and then it gets deployed to the cloud. That would be ideal, right? Because that would mean that the only job that we actually have is writing code, and we'd love that. The next step is change management. We want to make sure that wherever we are, our source code, we have control over what has happened, who committed what, and we can blame people. We should have database schemas and migration scripts into source control, because we want to make sure that we can roll back to previous versions. So as part of the continuous delivery pipeline, we want to make sure that at any point, if there's any issue, we can roll back easily. And that should be, like, we need the database schemas for that. And also the deployment scripts. Like, if something happened and we need to move to a different machine, we want to make sure we have everything in change management. And the key element, continuous integration. What does continuous integration refer to? Well, basically it just means that the entire team checks in code on a daily basis and everyone integrates with everyone else's code. How many people here are doing that? Well, there's a few, and I'm sure that all the others want to get there. So, it's a good place to be in. And then it also means that we are running tests after each commit. We are running tests to make sure that our code hasn't broken anything. And finally, again, our production is our priority. So we need to make sure that within 20 minutes after we've noticed that our production is broken, we should definitely be able to fix that. And ideally, we don't want to learn within a month that our production is broken. So why would you go through the effort of implementing a continuous delivery pipeline? Because it's easy, but it can get quite tough in certain areas. Well, first of all, it should lower the deployment risk. So if you start delivering code into production very often, then your code is going to get smaller. So then the chances of you checking in something that's broken are smaller, right? So you have fine-grained control over what you're doing. It's easier to identify when you've checked in an issue. It's easier to identify the culprit. You also get real progress, right? Because there's two parts. You can say it works on my machine, but does that really mean that you are done with the feature? Is that the end of working on a feature or on delivering a product? No. You want to be as close to a production environment as possible. So you want to be on a live replica or whatever. And then once you know that you've deployed to an environment that's very close to your production environment, that has the right database, that has that kind of traffic, you're running lots of tests on that, that's when you know that, okay, we do have real progress. We're done. We can deploy this to production. And finally, when you are deploying on a continuously, users are going to give you feedback, right? Because they're going to notice the new feature, the new UX feature that you've added, and they're going to be like, this is crap, I don't like this. Or they're going to be like, where's my menu? Like, what happened to my menu? Why is it now this weird looking hamburger? I don't like that. Cool, so those were the kind of the introduction to CICD and why would you use it. And I have a demo with where we're going to use the Angular CLI to build and run tests for our project, and we're going to use Circle CI to run this in an automated manner. Has anyone used Circle CI? Cool, so there's two people here. Basically, Circle CI is a SaaS offering that allows you to run the build and the tests for your project. And if your project is hosted on GitHub, you're actually going to do that for free for the first 1,500 minutes. So it's quite cool. And the way to set up Circle CI, so this is the website. It's actually super easy. Let's see if I open a new window. The first thing that you need to do is sign up for a new account, and you can sign up with either GitHub or Bitbucket, or you can use Google just to have a look at the sample project. And once you click sign up with GitHub, for example, I like GitHub, so I used GitHub. It's going to ask for your username and password, and then it's going to ask for lots of permissions. Like one of the things that I struggled with my main GitHub account, I had access to different repositories that weren't necessarily mine. So I started, and Circle CI asked for permissions to access that code and the issues and the documentation for those repositories. So I basically went ahead and created a new GitHub account that I'm only using with Circle CI. They don't have fine-grained control on certain repositories. So that's one caveat, like one thing that I didn't like. But there's many other things that I liked. So this is how you sign up. I've already signed up, so I'm going to show you just the dashboard. And the way you set up a new project, I've basically told Circle CI, you have access to all my projects, do whatever you want. And here are the list of projects that I've already used, built with Circle CI. So when you want to add a new project, to build a new project, you just click Add Project. And then you select this, maybe Dream9. I've done so many try runs, so. And then here you get to configure your project. And you can run your build on either a Linux platform or a Mac OS platform. Circle CI has two versions. The second one is faster, is the enhanced version, the turbo version. So we're definitely going to use that one. If you want to use Mac OS, though, it's 2.0 is not supported yet. And then there's a few languages that are supported here. I guess that the majority of people use Node, right? So I'm just going to select Node, and then Circle CI is actually helping us a lot. It's telling us that we need to create a Circle CI folder, and we need to add config.yaml into that folder. And then it's generating this sample config file. And I'm going to zoom into that, because we're going to go through the steps. And what this config file is basically a collection of jobs. And the most important job here is the build job. And that's like the main entry point for Circle CI. If Circle CI doesn't see a build job, it's not going to run anything. And you want to run your build or your job somewhere, right? So you need to specify whether you want to use a Docker instance where you're going to run all the steps, or you can actually use a virtual machine, a real virtual machine. The difference between the two is that Docker is going to be instantaneous, whereas the real machine is you're going to have more access to it, but it's going to take longer to start up. So it's going to be like 30 seconds to 1 minute just to kickstart the VM. And then if you're going to use Docker, then there's Circle CI has some pre-built images. Has anyone here used Docker before? A lot of hands. Super cool. Docker is just basically, for those of you who don't know, Docker is like just running processes in an isolated environment. And okay, and then there's this place, Docker Hub, where you can find images that other kind people and nice people have created for us. This working directory, I've just always left it for default. And then here's the list of steps, which is one of that's where we get to tell Circle CI what to do. And the first step is checking. Circle CI will check out our code, and then because it wants to be fast, you can actually cache your node modules. And first thing is going to be like, is there any cache for me so that I don't have to actually download all these dependencies? And if this is the first run, obviously there's not going to be any. So then it's going to go ahead and run npm install, and then it's going to save that cache, and then it's going to run tests. And that's pretty much everything. Like, this is CICD. Well, a part of it. So this is the actual file that I've used. I've just added here, not much. I've just added the build for production command, which you've already seen from Manfred. And the only thing that I've added here is build optimizer, because we want to build as small as possible, and also no progress, because I'm confident that all my builds will pass. I'm never going to check in code that's going to do anything bad, and I don't want to show the logs in the server logs, because it will pollute my logs. And then I also want to run tests, because that was the goal, right? Check in code, run the build, and then run the tests, make sure you haven't broken anything. But I want to run this as a single run, because I don't want my process to be hanging there forever, and I don't want to run any progress. And this is just automating the build and process. And only with these two lines, which I had to add to the default Circle CI configuration, I can now, on each commit that I'm making to my project on GitHub, I can now automate my build and tests run. That is super cool, right? So if someone checks in code and they don't know how to write code as good as I do, I'm going to be alerted by email, by Circle CI, that someone has broken the build, someone has broken the tests, and that's it. And then if you want to actually deploy your code, because that's how your users get to use your code, your product, there's also the deploy step. And here I've chosen to deploy to Azure. And I'm going to show you just quickly. Azure has this thing called app service, which is basically a place where you get to deploy your Node.js code or your Angular files. And I've already created one, but I'm going to show you quickly how this looks like. So I basically need to create a web app, and you give it a name, and this will be the URL that, let's see if this is taken. It's not. David, Angular Beers is not using Azure. We need to fix that. And you can choose to deploy your web app to either Windows or Linux. And then there's this thing where you have to select the type of machine that you want to use, and you can also choose what version of Node.js you want to have installed. And once that's done, you're going to get to a page like this one, where you're going to see the URL that you can access your application at, and some information about your app service, and some kind of metrics, and then there's lots of options here. I'm not going to go into those really right now, but if you have any questions after that, please make sure to reach out. I'm happy to help. But basically, in this publish.sh file, what I did was push my project once the tests and the build has passed. Push my project to the app service instance. And let's just change something quickly. Like, you'll see that now, if we go to this URL, it's not going to work like this. This is something that we need to fix. Is this really working? I'm going to change this message to "it's working." Okay. And what I'll do now is basically just commit this code, blah, blah. I'm not sure if you're going to have the patience to go through all of this with me, but I'm pushing this code to GitHub. And what should happen now is going to Circle CI, my list of builds. You can already see that Circle CI has picked up my blah blah commit, and then and it has queued my build. And it has already started running, and you can actually see here, I haven't showed you this already, but you can actually see here a few details, like the steps that we've defined in the config YAML file, and you can see logs for those steps. So here, like spinning up Docker is just 1 second, almost instantaneous. Checking out our code, I'm not sure if that's even happening, 0 seconds. Restoring cache, because we have built this before, we are just downloading the cache, and npm install takes a bit there as well. But anyway, after this has finished, we should be able to see at this URL the new text, like this is really working. And does this make sense? Do you have any questions regarding the process? What we've done is just build a project, create a Circle CI account, push that project to GitHub, connect Circle CI with our project, watch for changes, trigger a build and a test, and running tests for each change, and then deploy to Azure if everything is perfect. So what are we doing? We're just writing code, right? We push code to GitHub, and then everyone else is doing everything else. Like everyone else is doing our job, basically, kind of. Yeah, and I think that's, let's see if this is done. Not yet. So one thing with Circle CI, it will show you a green icon here. So this is now blue because it's still running. But then once everything is done, it will show a green, like, oh yeah, woohoo, it's done. And it's working. This is awesome. So this is the summary of the steps that we've just gone through. And I hope that you're now feeling a bit more relaxed about CICD, right? We had to write 2 or 3 lines of code, create an account, and that's pretty much everything. If you want to have access to any of these resources, if you want to try Circle CI or Azure App Service, the repo with just the 2 lines of code is on the first line. Thank you so much, and make sure to reach out if you have any questions.